What's the state of the world, Olivia?
The state of the world, oh my God. Yes, it's a sad state of the world at the moment, I think. But I don't want to fall into despair, because I always think that there is hope and there is possibility for change.
Dobbiamo decidere chi è il guru. Allora io avrei deciso così, lui è il guru, io sono l'elevato per stavolta. E l'elevato è un gradino leggermente superiore al guru. Ora,
But isn't the whole point of Cinque Stelle in Italy, Brexit and Trump?
Yeah.
I mean, aren't we told that that is the resurgence, that is people taking politics back and going beyond the technocratic European Union or the Wall Street-backed Hillary or the corrupt Italian class? I mean, isn't that exactly what this is? It's a kind of series of people's rebellions against old institutional structures. It just happens to be a right-wing one rather than a left-wing one.
I consider it a parody of it, like a version of this sort of engagement that it's good for these times, because people think that because they voted for Cinque Stelle, they are doing the right thing, the good thing, they are good citizens, whereas they simply delegate somebody else who decides for them. And it's still an elite, even smaller than the elites that govern our traditional parties, because in Cinque Stelle is fewer people. It's an elite, but they have been very successful in communicating this idea that they are the real democracy while being their parody. This is, for example, what happened in Italy with Berlusconi. Is the same thing, and this is what strikes me. If you look at the objective facts of Trump and of Berlusconi before, sincerely, people voted for Berlusconi, like people are voting for Trump, expecting that a multi-billionaire will solve the social inequalities. I think this is also an effect of the transformation of politics into governance, into management, into something that, who better than a multi-billionaire can do politics, if politics is that. They look at politics or consider politics just from the side of hate and not from the side of, I wouldn't say love, but positive feelings attached to participating, activism, being involved, all the good things about democracy. So this, I think, is some kind of what we could call a totalitarian specter somehow, something that survives from totalitarianism, where politics is identified exclusively with a friend-enemy or hate dimension. To me, at least from the way I see it and perceive it, this identity thing is just a substitute, a surrogate, some kind of like the 5-minute hate thing of George Orwell type of thing.
Cancer, an evil tumor, growing, spreading in our midst. Shout! Shout! Shout out his name!
This attention to identity and less attention to class, more to identity, is not so common in Italy, or it has become more and more common since the 70s, but not so hegemonical as it is in the United States or in Britain. 1968 and its aftermath are collusive with some sort of, the spirit of our contemporary times, of late capitalism, consumer society, identities like something that you consume and you and the idea of the centrality of desire. You know, this very, very important 1968 message, but easily co-opted into the capitalist and consumer society message. On the other hand, I must say that, for example, I was reading a book on Thomas Mann. Thomas Mann, the German writer, who in the beginning of the century wrote his famous political book is called Betrachtungen eines Unpolitischen. It's interesting to see in this book how the European culture was at the beginning of the 20th century so profoundly full of itself, so profoundly ethnocentric, racist, idea of its own superiority in respect to not just European. Thomas Mann speaks of the German identity. So you read that book and you understand a lot of what happened afterwards. And so when I was reading that, I was also speculating on the fact that if there hadn't been in European or Western culture all those movements of subjects that were prior, unable to speak, unable to come out, unable to claim their dignity, their rights to existence, their difference. If there hadn't been those subjects, Europe would have still been that fascist culture, okay? So I was thinking about, blacks, women, and gays, all that started to come up in the 60s and develop. For me, from a feminist point of view, I work on feminist issues. I'm interested also in what they call gender issues, but I think that our society, since it is a mass society, is very conformist. So it's not fashionable to say that you work on heterosexuality, yeah? Because even in the non-conformist fields or milieus, everybody's conformist. So there are very few intellectuals that don't comply to what is the standard, the canon, be it also a sort of critical or antagonist canon, but still remains a canon. There is this sectarian heritage that the left in Europe or the progressive discourse inherits from the religious discourse. This idea that I am purer than you, from the Protestant times of the Reformation, okay? And it turns out to be a sectarian in the end, a sectarian approach. And it's very, that is also very, very common in Italy as well, among groups, among feminists or groups of the left, antagonist groups. And this is one of the best ways to leave things unaltered, unchanged, because, it's totally ineffective, totally ineffective. Politics has become something that refers to the state protection of some individual rights. Okay? Politics at its best, because politics at its worst is that thing of the management that we discussed before. Politics at its best is this sort of safeguarding by some sort of authority of an individual space, that it has to be protected or promoted, defended in some ways. But if politics is that, as also Hannah Arendt says, if politics is just that, if politics is reduced to a bill of rights in the end, then politics is more and more the enforcement of a strong empowerment of that entity who is supposed to enforce these rights. So the state, or in another case, European Union and this and that. What is to be done? What is to be done? Well, it's a very difficult task because times are complex and we don't have to oversimplify like these populist movements do. If we speak of theory, critical theory, political theory in the last 20 years, it has been, since Foucault, it has been so centered on the question of the subject, okay? I think that now is time to move from the subject to the world, okay? Because we have had enough of the subject. And it seems that we have left the world, there. I think that we need, for example, a generative vocabulary for politics, not a vocabulary that is exclusively linked to opposing, resisting, demolishing, or this and that.
Human freedom can happen only in a plural public space where people act in concert. When they do so, actors not only realize their potential humanity, but contribute to create and foster a common world.
What I'm working on now is this idea of this public happiness. It is something that we have completely forgotten, because for us, happiness is something that relates exclusively to the individual dimension, whereas there is a happiness that relates to a public, to a participatory dimension. If we don't find some sort of common ground, there's no future, because the others have found a common ground. So the left is so scared about talking about a common project because of, again, what we have witnessed in the 20th century. But we have to go back to ask ourselves, what is the good life? Without a question on the good life, we don't go anywhere, I think. And it doesn't mean that we have to establish that good life is this and this and this, but at least we have to start talking about